Hello students, welcome to Sourav's classes. In today's video, we'll talk about disinvestment and sacrifice ratio. Before getting into that, first we have to write down the basic equation of Phillips curve, which is inflation rate depends on, Phillips curve shows that the inflation rate depends on the expected inflation rate and is negatively related to cyclical unemployment, which is the deviation of actual unemployment from its natural level, that is U minus UN, and another term which is supply shock. Now, as you have already demonstrated that the Phillips curve relationship shows the relation of inflation with that of expected inflation and cyclical unemployment and this term called supply shock. Now what we'll do is, in case of adaptive, now we'll explain what is adaptive expectation. Adaptive expectation basically says the expected inflation terms follows an inertia, which is, it is the past year's inflation, that is this year's expected inflation about next year will be past year's inflation, that is this, and we have assumed this to be constant at natural level of unemployment, and there is no supply shock. See, in most countries, in developed countries like USA, this term, this expected inflation, is always follows an inertia because the inflation rate almost same over the years, given there is no these two things. Now, when expected inflation equals to the inflation of previous years, we call this adaptive expectation. This is known as adaptive expectation. Now, in the case of adaptive expectation, we have shown that the inflation depends on previous year's inflation. The expected inflation depends on previous year's inflation. Now, any government, if there is any government, almost all government's policy or all government's objective is to reduce inflation, because inflation is not desirable. So all government's policy or all government's willingness is to reduce inflation. Now they can reduce inflation by reducing money supply. Let's say government has introduced a contractionary monetary policy for which the inflation will go down. Now inflation goes down means the price of the product goes down. Now from this equation we can say, this is the Phillips curve equation, we can say that when this term is constant due to decreasing inflation, there is always a tendency for unemployment, cyclical unemployment, to rise, because given the lower price level, what will do? The producers will have less profit because the price has gone down. So what they will do? They will cut down on their cost. How they will cut down on their cost? By employing less laborers, so that the unemployment rate will go down. Now, in order to decrease inflation, unemployment rate goes down. That is, this term for increases. Not goes down. Employment rate goes down, unemployment rate increases. Sorry, extremely sorry for this mistake. So, now what we will do? We'll explain this in a brief with 2 points. That first, what we did, we first shown the Phillips curve equation. Then second we did what? We showed that government policy is to reduce inflation. So they will reduce inflation by, let's say, by decreasing money supply, which will lead to less output level, which will lead to increasing unemployment. Now, as you can see, when unemployment rises, as a consequence, what happens? When unemployment rises, as a consequence, the output level will fall. So, in order to decrease Phillips curve, inflation rate, we have to give up on some level of, or we have to sacrifice some amount of GDP or output level, which is say Y. So, reduction in inflation leads to reduction in output. Now, this kind of inflation is called disinflation. This is known as disinflation. The kind of relation or the kind of inflation which, in order to reduce a kind of inflation which leads to output decreased output, we call it disinflation. Now, we'll explain what is sacrifice ratio. Now we'll explain what is sacrifice ratio. Now, as I have already stated, in order to reduce inflation, there will be some level of increase in the rate of unemployment. Now, if you want to reduce inflation by 1%, say, due to 1%, or to be more specific, in order to reduce inflation by 1%, the amount of GDP we have to sacrifice this is known as sacrifice ratio. So, in order to reduce the inflation, which every government's usual policy or objective is to reduce inflation, in order to reduce inflation, what will happen? You have to give up or you have to sacrifice some level of GDP, which is known as sacrifice ratio. So, first what we did? First we showed how to derive PC equation in the earlier video. Then from there we showed that what is adaptive expectation, and from adaptive expectation it followed us to this one. It is sacrifice, what is disinflation, and another is sacrifice ratio. So far we have talked about adaptive expectation, what is disinflation, what is sacrifice ratio. Now we'll take into consideration another thing called the current information which are available to the consumers. Now see, what usually happens is that, suppose government has reduced the money supply. Okay, now as government has reduced the money supply, so what will happen? the inflation will go down. In order to reduce the inflation, government has declared a reduction in monetary policy. Now, people do not take into account this information because their expected inflation depends on previous years expected inflation. So this term is almost nothing but almost constant. It does not take into account what the information which is available to the consumer. So in rational expectation approach, which we'll do in the next video, we'll say the consumer or the people, they take into account the given or the available information in the economy, and if they have this information that the money supply has increased, the government has increased the money supply, so they will increase their expectation of inflation. So given the unemployment rate, the inflation could be reduced. So for the time being, we'll end our video today at this level. In the next video, we'll talk about rational expectation. Thank you for watching our video, and if you have any doubt or if you have any queries or if you have any suggestion regarding this, then please do text me on WhatsApp. Okay, I'm giving you my WhatsApp number, which is 9836793076. Thank you.